Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Thanks for listening. And if you've listened before, thanks for coming back. Today, I'm with Jess Thulmer. Jess and I are talking today all about intuition. I've got Jess on to interview me on the topic, and she's in charge. So she's going to take the reins and ask me whatever she's going to ask me. We went out on social media for a few weeks and invited people to submit their questions, which people did. So she's got those, and I am aware of what those are. And other than that, it's all in her hands. I did want to start the episode, though, by explaining why the topic is so important to me, and then I'll turn over the reins. Um, Intuition as a topic is one of those things that I believe either gets marginalized or gets overinflated to the extent where it's something that we consider to be so special or that it's not real. And it's because we can't see it. So it's either a special power or it doesn't exist. Either one is a little bit funny to me. And I would just really enjoy if, as a culture, we could normalize it because I believe so strongly that it's just part of being human and it's an aspect of human potential that we can develop and really all enjoy and appreciate and benefit from. And so that's one of the reasons I'm so dedicated to it, is because I think we can just normalize it and enjoy it. And with those words, it's on to Jess. Thanks, Jess.
Yay, thank you, Jan, for that great intro. Hello, everyone. We're so excited to have you here. We're going to jump into it with what sounds like a basic question, but I think is a really important one because I don't think a lot of people fully understand. So, what is intuition?
I think that's a hard question. It's like you said, it sounds simple, but I think it's a really hard one um, because we don't really know, right? It's like we don't see it. We don't really know what it is. What I believe it is and how I understand it in my experience is that a simplistic definition is that it's our inner voice of wisdom. It's that inner driving sense that can steer us to our best decisions. That's how I look at it simply. With more of an explanation, though, I think that it is all of those unrealized and unseen cues that we pick up on a subconscious and neural level that feed into our wisdom that gives us a feedback mechanism.
That's
Um,
yeah, that's great.
but I really think it would be powerful for everyone to define it for themselves.
Yeah, I was going to actually kind of ask that follow up because I think that if you asked what is intuition to five different people, they might say something slightly different. So,
Yeah.
is it something we're able to kind of define ourselves? That gut feeling has to be a little different for every person, I'd imagine.
Well, it's interesting. I think what differs is I think there's a universality to it. I think what can differ is where it comes from.
Oh, so I said gut feeling, but you're saying not always.
People, in my experience, see it, feel it, hear it, smell it in different ways.
Oh, I
Gut
love
is
that.
one.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and gut is a common one, but it's not
hmm
universal.
Yeah. Wow. Smell it. That's really interesting. Kind of just as we're starting to talk about it, is intuition something that everybody has?
Yes, yes. I believe it's a human skill that everybody has, that we're born with it. I believe it's a part of our human potential, and that to me, human potential is something that we don't even know a portion of. That we as humans are so much more powerful than we even know. And we're learning that we are more powerful than we ever conceived of. And yet, even with all that information, we're so much more powerful than even that. And intuition is a part of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. This is a question that came from one of our Instagram followers. Is intuition lost if we don't nurture it?
I don't think it's lost in the sense that it goes away, but I
Mm,
do think it's, what would be a good word for it? We don't hear it, we don't recognize it, we block it, we hide it. It's
mm.
like we ignore it, and so it's not as obvious to us, excuse me, but it's still there.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. I have some more complex questions, but I'm going to keep going as we're diving into it. I'll come
Okay.
back to those. So, how, and I'm sure this is, as we've kind of already been talking about, different for every person. But maybe so instead of how does one know if they have intuition, what are some of the ways that somebody could know if they have intuition or are in tune with their intuition?
Well, I mean, that question is a hard one for me because I want everybody to just know that they have it. It's like I
Hmm.
just want to, shake the world's shoulders in a sense and say, "You do, you do, you do."
Yeah,
Um,
have it. Yeah.
but I guess if someone's asking the question, it also suggests to me that they've already had signs or indications that are telling them
Hmm.
something that is an intuitive input. Because for them to ask the question says to me they're wondering. And if they're wondering, why are they wondering? So, what is it that caused them to ask the question? And that is the intuitive input I would say pay attention to. So, for
Hmm.
example, if somebody's asking that, maybe they noticed some synchronicities, or
Yeah.
maybe they noticed that they had a hunch about something and it happened. Whatever those little clues were, that would
Right.
be perhaps how they were getting their input.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And just for those who don't know, you have a whole course on intuition, how to
I do.
hear what you know. You
Yes,
do.
I do.
So some of these questions I don't want. I mean, I'll ask them, but you have a whole course on it. So if people want to know more, they can definitely go learn more. But do you have what are some like basic touch points for how somebody can really get into their intuition and really kind of define that for themselves? A lot of people are curious about what it takes to get in touch with it, and again, it's probably not like a here's the right answer for everyone, but just what are some ideas around that question?
There's so many ways to approach that it's hard for me to answer, and I don't want to avoid the question. So I'm
Sure.
gonna take a little time with this one.
Yeah, of course.
Um, I have a whole process that I encourage with it, and I think that's really important that we have a process. So that's what I want to
Mhm.
first emphasize is that it is useful. It's not to have a process. It's not something that
Right.
just because it's a skill, boom, we should know how to do it.
Right.
Just because we can
Mhm.
walk, we should know how to walk. Just because we
Right.
are all intuitive, we should know how to use this skill. Um, the process that I encourage is I've set it out as clear, listen, and receive. And
Mm.
by those words, what I mean is clearing means to get rid of all the distractions in our world. Because sometimes the reason that we don't realize we're intuitive is there's too much stuff in our world, in our head, in our environment. And by
Mm.
stuff, I mean noise, busyness,
Mhm.
distraction,
Mhm.
internal and external.
Sure.
And then listening is a whole different aspect after clearing. Okay, so you clear all that distraction, it still takes quiet and contemplation and time to get that.
Mm.
And then
Mhm.
it takes receiving. So, what happens when you get an intuitive input? Whether it comes in a thought or a feeling or a sense,
Mm.
how will you know?
Mhm.
It could be hitting you literally over the head and you might not know it.
Mhm.
So it
Right.
actually takes tuning into those things. And then there's, of course, the impetus to act on what you receive. So those ways, are places to start. But some really simple things. actions to take to get to those stages are to begin taking time for yourself, because it takes confidence to trust yourself enough to be able to do these things. So take time for yourself, take time to tune out the distractions, to sit in contemplation, to journal,
Mm.
those sorts of things.
You consider that, or how close, this is a little off the cuff, but how closely is that connected to like meditation? Because the way you just described that to me sounds like taking that time to really, that clearing, that idea of clearing, that to me sounds like meditation.
Mhm.
Are they're I mean, and for those who don't know too, meditation is one of your, something I consider you're an expert in. So, I mean, do you think about those two kind of in the same realm, or are they totally different to you?
To me, they're very related. I hesitate to always talk about meditation because meditation for people is often a block, and
Hmm.
people are resistant often to meditation. And so the word meditation brings up so many connotations. And yet, meditation is just often a process of clearing, of
Right.
sitting in peace and silence and allowing that clearing. And so,
Yeah.
yes, they are very much related, but it doesn't mean you have to sit in do a mantra for 30 to 60 minutes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's great. This is a question that I heard actually from a couple of people. But how do you know if it's your intuition or just your mind messing with you? Is how the question was phrased. But I mean, I've thought this too. Like, how do you really know if like this is something I'm supposed to be listening to, or something that's just some of that noise you were talking about earlier?
Mhm. Um, and again, there's so many different things that different ways this could be answered because it can be different things. I want to start with comparing it to whether it's an emotional input, because often
Oh
when
yeah.
someone thinks it's their mind messing with them, what that is translating to in the question to me is emotions. And this one to me is really easy to distinguish once you know how to look at it. Emotions and intuition get confused frequently, and they're very different because intuition has no emotional charge. It's neutral. And
Mm.
that's the big difference. Sometimes we think that intuition is enthusiastic and it really wants us to go for something that's so positive. It's not. It could care less.
Mm.
It has no charge at all.
Yeah.
It's just detached. And so
Awesome.
if the quote unquote intuition is saying, "Oh man, great idea. This is what you should do." Big keyword
Yeah.
there, should. And it's enthusiastic, and you get that fire in your gut of, "Oh yeah." And you go away thinking, "I've got this intuitive thought that this is the answer." Huge red mark. That's red flag. That's not intuition. Um,
Wow.
the enthusiasm, the fire in the
Hmm.
belly, all of that. No, intuition is detached, it's neutral, always positive, but it's just a
Sure.
very clear sort of voice. Not always a voice, I mean, some sort of sign, but it's clear,
Sure.
it's detached, it's positive, where emotions have a charge. So
They
that
sure do.
one, yeah, yeah. So that one's a real good litmus test, if you're looking at enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm. And then the other thing is, and this is trickier if you're newer to checking out your input, but over
Mhm.
time you can learn where intuition hits on you. And by that I mean, um, and it sounds strange when I say it, but everybody listening that has had intuitive input will understand what I'm saying. We
Mhm.
have different centers in our body, and then our entire body receives our intuitive input. We just don't think of it that way when we talk, but it hits, we have our cranial brain, and then we have
Mm.
our heart, and we have our gut, and then we have our entire body. All of our body receives input, and our body is a tremendous mechanism for filtering all the input. So you can use your body to test the information and see
Mm.
how it registers. and you can talk through your body to your intuition and test it. Just
I
ask.
love that. Yeah. That's awesome. I really didn't, I mean, I feel like through working with you for however many years it's been now, I understand intuition in a really deeper way than I used to. But that I like to know that distinction between the emotions, and just thinking about it as neutral is really helpful. That really helps me like really understand what that is, because I tend to act on my emotions. So yeah,
And that's
that's
often a good thing. We need emotion to drive us and propel us, and but when we're looking for intuition, it's good to know the difference.
yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that makes sense. Okay, let's see here. Can you talk to your intuition, or you've kind of gone over this a little bit, but like how would you, and you don't have to say you personally, but how do people communicate with their intuition?
Yes,
Can you
and
like if I had a something on my mind?
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah, and I will personalize this because I'll say how I do it, and I don't
Yeah.
know how everyone does it. I know how a few people do it because they've shared it with me, but, I do talk to my intuition. I talk constantly to my intuition. I do it on paper. I do it in writing through letters, through my journal. I do it through what I guess would technically be considered prayers in the sense that it's a request. And so any request to a source that is beyond and unseen might be considered a prayer. Um,
Yeah.
I also talk like throughout the day to my intuition. I'll ask questions. I'll constantly talk to my intuition. Sometimes I'll talk out loud to my intuition. Um, so constantly, yeah.
That's so cool.
It's a
And
little
so
weird.
as the Oh, no, it's cool. I like it. I like weird. As we were saying earlier, when I said that gut feeling, and it doesn't have to be there. So somebody that maybe their intuition comes to them, by sight or sound or smell. Is that's how a person like that might communicate to their intuition in a slightly different way? Or I mean, anybody
Yes.
can probably.
Yes. You can also get it through different parts of your body. I mean, you can get like sensations in different limbs, like a
Yeah.
nudge on the shoulder or a feeling on your leg or on your head
Mhm.
or in your hands or feet, like actual sensations. And then all the senses. It comes through in various ways. Also, signs. Um, One really fun way that intuition often comes through, particularly if you're first developing intuition, I love this. It's so fun because uh, I don't know if it's true for everybody, but I've known it to be true for many people. It, Intuition often has a sense of humor, and it will come through in music lyrics or
Wow.
titles, movie titles, book titles, just,
Really?
yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So if you ask a question or something's on your mind, the
Yeah.
answer will come through in a lyric or a title or even like you're driving and you'll see something with that answer on it.
Yeah. That's definitely happened to me. That's really cool. I like that. Yeah. Um, how long, this is just a little bit more about you and intuition. How long have you, and I use the word expert, so if you don't like that word, I'm sorry, but how long have you been an expert on intuition?
Did you know I was going to say something about the word expert?
More modest than I think you should be. So yeah.
Um, I always think of that word as just something we use in our culture as a marketing thing because I don't think
Mm,
of myself as an expert. I think we're all working towards, whatever we're working on. Um, I don't know. I've always been committed to using my intuition, is how I think of this since I was little. I
yeah.
just didn't think it was anything special or unusual or unique
Hmm.
because it was all I knew. And I didn't know
Right.
that everybody didn't talk to their intuition and use it until I was quite a bit
Hmm.
older. And I really didn't even know I was strange and unusual until quite a bit older. and I had people
Wow.
in the corporate world tell me I wasn't normal, um, which was, kind of funny, but it wasn't funny at the time. Um, so I guess in that sense, I've always been that way. In terms of teaching it, though, not until much more recently on a official sort of large level. Personally and individually, I've helped people learn and use it probably forever.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
The word I'm not the biggest fan of the word expert either, but with things like I have noticed that intuition and meditation and like yoga practices and stuff with the rise of a lot of people getting more and more interested um, in things like that on social media, especially Instagram. I just see a lot of people kind of toss around definitions, and and I know that you actually not that's totally fine. I think it's exciting that people are exploring it, but I do think it's important that you're differentiated from those people because you
Thank
actually, you have spent your entire life studying and teaching, and that is different than someone that's just kind of exploring it and maybe has a big Instagram following. So
thank
that's me defending my use of the word expert there.
you. Thank you, Jess, and I appreciate
You're welcome. You're welcome. Something that I'm personally really curious about, and this is kind of a double question, but is intuition something you can always access?
Oh, I love that one. Um,
Okay.
Again, it's a yes and no question. Yes, but we don't always know that we can. So, what I mean
Mm,
by that is, I really feel that it's helpful, really helpful, to keep a journal of our intuitive
mm,
process and record what we're getting back, because at those times, and I'll give examples of some of these sorts of times, at the times when it feels like nothing is coming through, in
mm.
hindsight, we can see through writing what we've recorded that in fact it was all there all the time, but we weren't able to see it. And that's the
That's
only
really
way.
cool.
Yeah, and that's the only way I can say with confidence that yes, it is always there, because I have seen it in hindsight. However, at the time, it feels like, hey, is nobody hearing me here? I'm
That
really
is
needing some help.
right. Yeah, that is so this is what I meant by double question is can something affect your intuition or change it in a way like a major trauma, or not even necessarily trauma, but a major life event? You get married, or you get hurt in some way, or you get divorced. Like there's all these big things that can just drastically change your outlook and sometimes like your physical body. Like is intuition, does it kind of shift with you throughout your life?
Yeah. And all those things you mentioned, those things often can help your intuition, in fact.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, you can tune in deeper at those times. They can be shifts
Yeah.
forward more into it. No pun intended, but it is interesting that the language actually fosters that more into it as we go more into ourselves. Um, but what can hide us from it is also at times of high stress, trauma, grief, all of that. The external world is causing distraction, stress, and those sorts of times can hide the input also. So,
Right. That makes sense. Yeah.
and sometimes at those times, we're surrounded by a lot of people. And when we're distracted by a lot of people, it can not always, but it can have the impact of not allowing us to receive our own voices or voice.
Right. A little tougher to do that clearing method when
Mhm.
you're, yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. How can I, this is kind of related to one of the earlier questions, but how can I trust my intuition? And I don't mean me specifically, but if you are familiar enough with it and you think you have, some of the like ways that intuition shows up in your life, how can you really start to lean on that and really trust yourself with that?
That's a really important, good question because intuition, above all, does take confidence. It really takes a lot of self confidence and trust. When you think about it, w- we're asking ourselves when we're intuitive to trust something that makes no sense. We can't see it. It sounds a little crazy. If we describe it out loud, it's like totally certifiable crazy. Um, and we want to make decisions and live our life by it. So that takes a
Yeah.
lot of confidence and trust and pretty high levels of self esteem. So your
Hmm.
question is really important. One of the best ways I know of to do it is to continue validating it through whatever works for you. My best suggestion for it is that journal, recording,
Hmm.
recording, 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 because you'll see the validation. And
Yeah.
that's what we can't see with intuition. We can't see that voice or the information, but we can record what we're getting, and that's the only way I really know that is a way to give ourselves our own feedback.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Do you, maybe this is too personal. Do you look back on some of that old, some of your old journals and stuff from, I don't know, 10 years ago and just kind of touch back to like that mindset you had then? I
No,
think that'd be really interesting for me.
no.
No,
Have I ever told
just
you my
box them
notebook?
away.
No.
No.
Oh no, I have no. It's kind of a joke. I have notebooks, like a closet of notebooks I never look at. Yeah, there's
Wow.
yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
actually worry
Yeah.
about
I'm similar.
yeah. I want them burned when I die. I don't know what I worry about what will happen with my
Mhm.
notebooks when I die.
Yeah.
Half joking, half
I
not.
Yeah, I used to always keep a journal growing up, and then I started to ditch them because I was similarly. I was like, I don't want other people to like get a hold of these one day. I don't do that anymore, but I feel the same way. And now I'm like, I wish I had some of those to look back on, but I don't. It's okay.
Mhm,
Yeah, interesting. But
mhm.
um, okay, this is another question that came from our Instagram. And it's a tough question, but I think, and we both kind of interpreted it slightly different. So, however you want to take this, but is it better to act on intuition before reason and fear and over analysis can neuter any good idea, or better to just act on your intuition and trust it?
This question is a little hard for me to decipher, and the way that I've deciphered it is by, and I love this question. The way I've
Yeah,
deciphered it
good
is,
one.
yeah, I look at it more as a timing issue because of the way that the individual phrased it, um, and
Mhm.
the fact that he used reason, fear, and overanalysis in the question. Because sometimes if we hesitate and we're afraid, there's a reason. Being afraid of something doesn't mean we always should push forward. It sometimes means we need more data. We need more something. And what is still true though is that main intuitive message. So if we're getting something that says, I have no idea. I'm not suggesting anything behind what this question was, but let's say this is a career suggestion. Some intuitive
Sure.
career idea. Let's say that's what it is. Maybe it isn't time to move forward on that, but that career idea is still a valid one. Um,
Right.
it's could be something like that. Um,
Mhm.
what we are always trying to do with intuition, because of our culture and our world and how our society is built, is we're by necessity putting something that is non-logical in a logical framework because we live in a logical world. We take something that's
Mhm.
all unseen and all of that and putting it into a real rational framework. And sometimes it's easy because it makes sense, but sometimes it really takes a little more deciphering. And that's how I interpret this
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. That's great. We've already kind of covered this, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just for clarity's sake. Um, is there a certain age you have to be to start getting in touch with your intuition or to start developing your intuition?
Ah, no, but it's interesting. Children are often very, very intuitive, and we lose a lot of it as we grow up because of
Mm-hmm.
messages, that we just get of either fear, distrust. I mean, who trusts imaginary stuff, right? And we can't validate it, so
Right.
it's not real. Um, so as we grow up, unless it's nurtured in some way, our culture, and I'm not putting any blame on anything, our culture just in the at least up to now hasn't fostered it. Um, and so there's no age parameter on it whatsoever. I do see a shift. There's a real shift in our culture towards intuition being much more of a topic. It's more
Yeah.
something that you hear about, see. I don't think it's understood real well. I hear it used in different ways that
Yeah.
really don't make a lot of sense, but it at least is,
Me too. Yeah.
yeah. But at least it's a concept
Yeah.
being discussed.
Does it, I mean, this is what you're saying this whole time, is that you want it to be, normalized and something that we should all embrace and talk about. Does it excite you to see that kind of uprise, or does it worry you a little because it's, people who aren't fully understanding or comprehending or giving misinformation? It's kind of a combo of those two things.
It really excites me. The thing that I think would be helpful if everyone could learn one thing, like one
Mm,
thing about intuition, would be that thing about emotion and intuition. If we
yeah.
all knew how to make the distinction between that, it'd be like a little key. Because what I
Yeah.
hear a lot in confusion is reasoning of, oh, I listened to my intuition and XYZ. And
Mm,
what sometimes is meant by that is an emotional impulse.
yeah.
And it's understandable, but it's not the
Mhm.
same as intuition.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, like I said, even I definitely conflate the two, and I didn't even realize until you said that. Oh yeah, that's not the same thing. um, this might be something that is not different, but what does it mean to be intuitive versus just having intuition? But
Hmm.
like I don't see very many people describe themselves as intuitive, even if they're somewhat familiar with how they perceive intuition to be for them.
It's interesting. As you first asked the question, I thought of one thing and then I thought of another. So I'm going to say both.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay,
hmm,
great.
hmm. I- the first thing I thought of was being intuitive is like, I've said before, we're all intuitive. So it's like being spiritual. We're all spiritual because it's an aspect of who we are and what we are. But then there's this part of being intuitive that takes a commitment to listening to your intuition. If you're an intuitive person, it means, I think, that you're committed to living intuitively, that you're really, at least how I think, yeah, but who's going to, well, I was going to ask a question that I answered before I even got up. There are people who walk around saying that, but I mean, normalizing it again, I wouldn't expect most people to walk around saying anyway.
Great.
Um,
Yeah.
but making decisions, honoring your intuition is how I think of living intuitively. It's just like one more piece of the puzzle. It's
Yeah.
not doing anything more than that. It's just one more piece of the puzzle of life that's really, really useful. But I then
Yeah.
thought of another aspect of it, and this is getting into a whole side discussion that we probably don't want to get into at length, but I do think there's some confusion with intuitive and psychic, that the word psychic and intuitive is tied in. And to me, that is different. Intuitive, in the way that I use it, um, refers to tuning into your own inner wisdom. And
Mhm.
psychic is sometimes used interchangeably, and I don't refer to it the same way.
That was actually going to be a question I asked you, but it felt like too broad. But I'm glad you mentioned that because I just in researching intuition, every week we do Intuition Wednesday where we do a little clip of, how to hear what you know. And so I've ended up personally just coming across a lot of stuff with intuition.
Mhm.
And that's something that I've seen a lot of people either use interchangeably or specifically ask, what is the difference between these two things? So that's,
Ah.
I'm glad you, yeah. And it's interesting to me too, because I think even I, a few years ago, maybe thought the same thing. I used to say when I was a kid, I used to say, I'm a psychic because I would have these feelings of like sometimes these things would come true. And I have this whole story about Sunny Bono. I'll tell you another time. But yeah, I mean, I used to say I'm a psychic, but as an adult, I'm not a psychic. But I think I've just always kind of been in touch with my intuition. But learning those differences it was big for me. So
Mhm.
it's an interesting conversation. Yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was my last question. Let me just double check. I don't want to miss any of our Instagram questions, but I think that was all of them. Um, yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything else that you think I should have asked or that you want to touch base on?
You're in charge. I can't think of it. It's so nice not to be in charge.
Yeah, I like this. I like when we do this.
I do too.
It's fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I personally think this conversation could go on for a really long time. So I think that it's probably something worth revisiting again because there's always these questions that are coming up. And I do think that people really like to hear more about intuition and specifically from you. So I think it's something that it's really special and I love learning about it, and I know other people do too. So it's been really nice to hear some of these answers. I've
Let's
been
do
sitting on these questions wondering. Yeah, I
it.
think it's awesome. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do it again. It'll be fun.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to say one more time, how to hear what you know, and whenever we post this anywhere, we'll make sure we link to that. But it's an awesome course, and we do share clips from it every week. So for people who have not seen those, check it out. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, we put it everywhere. And if you are interested, that course is available for you to purchase. So
Thank
I'm
you.
saying that because Jan won't say it, but it's really awesome.
Thank you. I'm really proud of the course.
So
I am.
you're
I
welcome.
I really am
It's
proud of the
awesome.
course. I love it. And
Yeah.
excited that I'm doing a first time thing this fall with the course, my live version, which I've never done before. So,
I'm so excited for that.
me too. Me too. So maybe we can do another little thing about
Yes,
that beforehand. Since I've never
that would
done
be
on live.
perfect. Yeah.
Okay. That'll be fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody. And thanks, Jess.
Thank you, Jan. It's my pleasure.
More later.
Bye.
Bye.